First, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to present our experience in pre-implantation diagnosis of mitochondrial DNA disorder. Mitochondrial diseases are frequent. They can cause almost any symptom at any age, and their heredity differs according to the location of the mutation. When the mutation is localized in a nuclear gene, then it follows Mendelian inheritance. But when it's localized in the mitochondrial DNA, then it follows maternal transmission. And the mutation in mitochondrial DNA accounts for around 25% of the cases of mitochondrial disease. This is due to the double genetic origin of the mitochondrial respiratory chain, whose 13 polypeptides are encoded by mitochondrial DNA. And during the last decades, many pathogenic mitochondrial DNA mutations have been described. And when there is a mitochondrial DNA mutation, it often coexists with wild-type mitochondrial DNA, and it is called an heteroplasmic state. And because mitochondrial DNA segregation during mitosis is thought to be random, then it can lead to an accumulation of mutant molecules in some cells, and it is called an homoplasmic state. And when the mutant load is over a threshold, then symptoms occur. Mitochondrial DNA segregation during meiosis is more complicated and poorly understood. Many observations have reported on rapid shift in mitochondrial DNA segregation, resulting in oocyte carrier of either wild-type or mutant mitochondrial DNA. And this observation has led to the bottleneck theory. And this bottleneck would result in a very small number of founder mitochondrial DNA molecule producing either wild-type or mutant oocyte. However, because the mechanisms underlying this bottleneck and because the time when it's supposed to occur are not known, the genetic counseling for this disorder is very complicated. But because these disorders are very severe and because there's no treatment, many couples at risk ask for prenatal or pre-implantation diagnosis. So all these procedures are based on the observation that symptoms roughly correlate to the mutant level with a threshold effect. And all antenatal procedures are therefore based on the assessment of the mutant load in a cell or in a tissue of a fetus in order to predict the risk of this fetus or of an embryo to be severely affected. So what are the problem with PGD for mitochondrial DNA disorder? It concerns its feasibility. PGD for mitochondrial DNA disorder requires that mutant load be stable among the different cells of a pre-implantation embryo and during the whole embryo-fetal development. And it also requires that there is a good correlation between the mutant load assessed in the pre-implantation period and the clinical outcome of the baby. So we designed a protocol for PGD for mitochondrial DNA disorder, which is very similar to other conditions. We only taken in charge women who are carrier of the mutation. The embryonic biopsy is performed at day 3 or at day 4, and we usually analyze 2 different cells of pre-implantation embryo. And the mutant load is quantified by a semi-quantitative fluorescent PCR followed by an enzymatic digest. So here I show you a 16-year experience of PGD for mitochondrial DNA disorder in our center. 15 couples have been taken in charge. 28 ovarian stimulation cycles were started, resulting in 25 oocyte retrievals, and 21 PGD were performed, 18 on day 3 and 3 on day 4. A total of 93 pre-implantation embryos have been studied. 41 were at risk to carry the 3243 mutation, which is a cause of MELAS syndrome. The 30 pre-implantation embryo were at risk to carry one of this mutation. I have no pointer. One of these mutations, which are located in the ATP6 gene and a cause of NARP syndrome, and 19 embryos were at risk to carry the MERF mutation, here the A344 mutation, and 3 embryos were tested for this very severe mutation, the 10197 mutation, which is the cause of Lee syndrome. Here are the characteristic of the patients we've taken in charge, and I show you the maternal mutant load in blood, urine, and buccal cells. And as you can see, some patients have quite low mutant levels, and many of them were asymptomatic, but some have very high mutant load. Here, this patient was moderately affected with MERS syndrome. The first PGD we've performed was for the 8993 T2G mutation, and the results were quite surprising since all embryos were homoplasmic, either for the wild-type molecules or for the mutant ones. And this was surprising, but not so much, because it was in line with a previous report on oocytes from a carrier patient by another group who have reported on that all oocytes of the patient were homoplasmic, either for the wild type or for the mutant molecules. And this shift of the mutant load illustrates perfectly why the bottleneck phenomenon. And when we've performed PGD for another mutation, the 8993 T2C mutation, which is located in the same gene, at the same position, but resulting in a different substitution, you can see that the mitochondrial DNA segregation was completely different. No embryo was homoplasmic. All embryos were heteroplasmic with a mutant load that were largely distributed around the mean, which was close to the maternal mutant load. We've transferred 6 embryos in 5 different transfers, and in one case we transferred 2 mutation-free embryos, and we've got 1 pregnancy. Another PGD, other PGD were performed for the 9185 mutation, which is also located in the ATP6 gene and the cause of NARP syndrome. And again, the distribution of the mutant load were completely random around the mean, which was very close to the maternal mutant levels. We've transferred 3 embryos, but no pregnancy ensued. Another PGD was performed for this very severe mutation for this patient who lost 2 sons from Lee syndrome. 3 embryos were available for testing, and again you can see the shift in mitochondrial DNA populations in the different embryos, with 1 embryo carrying almost only wild-type mitochondrial DNA molecules and 2 others carrying almost only mutant mitochondrial DNA molecules. So we've transferred the first embryo, but no pregnancy ensued. We also performed PGD for the 3243 mutation, which is the most frequent mutation of the mitochondrial DNA. And interestingly, you can see that many embryos did not carry the mutation, and the other ones are a carrier of heteroplasmic mutant load. again, this was in line with a previous study performed on oocytes from a carrier patient by Brown, and showing a random distribution of the mutant load among the different oocytes. And interestingly, we have never observed embryo carrier of very high mutant levels for this mutation. This suggests that negative selection occurs at what time over cells carrying very high mutant level of this mutation. So we've transferred 13 embryos, all of them carrying less than 25% mutant level. And in one case, we've transferred 2 embryos here, and we've got 1 pregnancy. The PGD was also performed for the H344 mutation, which is a cause of MERS syndrome, for 2 different patients. The first one have been taken in charge for 3 IVF cycles. We've got 10 embryos. You can see the wide distribution of the mutant load for this patient, but unfortunately, because of poor embryonic quality, we did not transfer any embryo for this patient. And another couple performed PGD for the same mutation. 1 IVF cycle was performed. We've got 9 embryos, and the patient was the carrier of the very high mutant level. As you can see, the mutant load in her embryos were very, very high. And at first, we did not consider any for transfer, but the couple insisted a lot. And because in the literature, there were no patients carrying mutant load under 70 affected by MERS syndrome, we decided to transfer 2 embryos, and she get pregnant. For this patient, we also have 1 embryo with conflicting result. This is the only one in all our series, because in one cell we found 60% mutant load, and the other one 35%. We reanalyzed the whole embryo, and we found an intermediate mutant level around 50%. And this observation prompted us to collect all available clinical data of PGD, and we compared the mutant load in a single blastomer with the mutant load in the remaining ones, and we found that the mutant load of one blastomer is highly predictive of the mutant load of the remaining embryos, but there are some outliers. I can't show you, but and these results were in contradiction with results obtained from another species, the rhesus macaque, where Lee and colleagues have shown a wide distribution of the mutant load among the different cells in the pre-implantation embryo. Whatever the reason for these differences, we now consider that PGD is an appropriate tool for the prevention of mitochondrial DNA disease. So here are the results. We've performed 21 PGD, 41 embryos were carrier of quite low mutant level, under 30%, and many of them were transferred. But as I show you, some embryo over 30% were transferred. Here are the threshold we used for all the mutation. And we've got 3 pregnancies and 3 PGD babies were born. And here are the follow-up of the children. We recommend the prenatal diagnosis for when a pregnancy occurs after a PGD for a mitochondrial DNA mutation, because there's no many data about potential variation of the mutant load during embryo-fetal development. And as you can see, the mutant load in the amniotic fluid and in the cord blood sample at birth were very similar to the mutant load we have got on the single blastomer. So this result suggests that the mutant load are stable during embryo-fetal development. 3 PGD were born. Due to ethical reasons, we declined any biological survey of these children. We only asked the parents to inform us about developmental delay or medical problems. As far as we know, they are all healthy to date, with a postnatal follow-up ranging from 8 to 14 years. But of course, we should continue the follow-up. What about PGD at other stages? We do not recommend preconceptional diagnosis for mitochondrial DNA mutation, since we've shown that the mutant load in the polar body can be quite different from the mutant load in the oocyte or in the pre-implantation embryos. What about the trophectoderm biopsy? There's limited experience in the literature and in our center, but Mitalipov has reported the discrepancies between the trophectoderm, the mutant load assessed in the trophectoderm and the mutant load assessed in the blood of the baby born and aged of 6 months. So to conclude, I hope I convinced you that PGD is relevant for mitochondrial DNA disorders. You can perform the biopsy at day 3 or 4, but we still recommend the 2-blastomer biopsy. A careful genetic counseling should be performed prior to the PGD project, and an agreement on the threshold should be found with the couple. Because there are few data on mitochondrial DNA segregation, we still recommend a prenatal diagnosis in case of a pregnancy. I also show you some limitations. We've got a very low baby take-home rate in this series. This could be due to the high number of what we considered affected embryos. And this could also be due to a poor embryonic quality in some patients, and this should be studied further because some other groups have reported a high risk of premature ovarian failure in patients affected by mitochondrial disease. 2 babies born after PGD are heteroplasmic, and they still have a residual risk to develop symptoms. And the PGD can't be applied to homoplasmic patients or to patients who have a very high mutant levels. So we need to develop alternatives. Oocyte donation is an option, but we probably still have to work on gene therapies or on nuclear transfer that have been authorized in the UK. I'd like to thank all my colleagues, and particularly Nelly Friedman and Alexandra Benaki for this long collaboration. And I would like to thank you for your attention.